If you look at the Jehovah's Witness website, jw.org, and type in war into the search bar, you will find several articles explaining the Jehovah's Witness view of war. Articles explaining war in the ancient past, in Jesus' day, and war today. They conclude that war in ancient past was solely determined by God. War in Jesus' day was forbidden by Jesus, because Jesus said, "Flee, and those who live by the sword shall die by the sword," and war in the modern day is forbidden, that we are supposed to wait for Armageddon. Are the Jehovah's Witnesses correct? Should the Christians participate or not? How do the Christians respond? After nearly a decade of studying the Bible, logic, philosophy, learning from the top thinkers from around the world on the subject of religion and particularly Christianity, today I'd like to share my thoughts with you on war. Unlike the Jehovah's Witnesses, who are told what they must believe about the Bible, the Christians are free to read the Bible for themselves and to believe what it says. The Christians are united in the essentials, in the non-essentials liberty, and in all things charity. As the Bible says, in such matters that are not essential to receiving everlasting life, each person should be fully convinced in his own mind. The Christian's view on war can be categorized into three options, which are: 1. Always go to war when the government goes to war. 2. Never go to war when your government goes to war. Or 3. Sometimes go to war when your government goes to war. Your choice here will probably be determined by your view on civil disobedience. See our video titled Jehovah's Witness and Politics. Since most Christians are absolutists, your choice here will probably depend on your view of absolutism, whether or not absolute laws never conflict or do conflict, etc. Please see our video on Christian ethics for more information. The three categories for the Christian view of war, which are called activism, pacifism, and selectivism. A brief outline of each position is as follows. Activism, the view that Christians should go to war, any war that his government participates in, because God ordained government and commands you to obey government. The activist arguments are as follows. They're biblical arguments. In the Old Testament, God ordained human government from the very beginning of man. Adam's reign over the earth, the sword to Noah and Abraham. The form of government may have changed, but the principles of government is always there. David, the king of war. God is in total control of the kingdoms of men. God controls the rise and fall of nations all throughout the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, it confirms the Old Testament of God-ordained government. Jesus said, "Give to Caesar that which is Caesar's." God gave Pilate power to kill Jesus. We are to give thanks to God for kings and those in authority. The Bible says that we are to submit and be obedient to the rulers and authorities. Peter says to be subject to the king and his governors. There is no government that has not been established by God to bear the sword. Now, the activist social arguments are as follows. The government raised you and educated you, therefore you have a duty to obey the government. If not, you're free to leave your government, and without government there would be chaos. In regards to loving your enemies, you can love your child even as you call the police on him for committing a crime. Okay, now pacifism. Pacifism, the view that says you should never go to war because killing is wrong. The pacifist arguments are as follows. They're biblical arguments. Killing is wrong. Thou shalt not murder. And war is mass murder. When Israel went to war, it was a unique circumstance. They were acting as God's theocratic instrument. Or they'll say the Old Testament wars were not God's perfect will, but his permissive will. That is, he allows the war to take place, but he had a much better way. kind of like he allowed divorce because of their hard hearts, or allowing Saul to be king even though he had chosen David. "Do not resist evil, man, but turn the other cheek," said Jesus. "Vengeance belongs to God. Repay evil with good." And when Jesus cleansed the temple with a whip, that doesn't justify war. And the pacifist social arguments are as follows. War breeds war, which results in many evils. And war is based on greed, which is also evil. Okay, now selectivism. Selectivism, the view that says it's right to participate in some wars. The selectivist attempts to show that the activist is incorrect, that some wars are unjust, and also disobeying the government is sometimes just. And then the selectivist attempts to show that the pacifist is incorrect, that some wars are just. Arguments are as follows. The biblical arguments showing that you don't have to always obey the government. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to obey the king and worship the false idol. Daniel disobeyed the king's law not to pray. The early apostles disobeyed orders not to preach the gospel. The Hebrew midwives disobeyed the king of Egypt and the command to kill the male babies, and God blessed them. Now the biblical arguments showing war is sometimes just. First, the power of capital punishment was given by God to Noah, Moses in the law, and to the Romans. Jesus commanded his disciples to buy a sword, apparently in self-defense, not for spreading the gospel. Abraham went to battle. Paul accepted protection by the Roman army. John the Baptist told the soldiers, in order to be saved, to be good soldiers. Nothing about leaving the army. The military is appointed by God to execute justice on behalf of the government. Turn the other cheek means not to seek revenge. And true love will protect innocent people from evil aggressors. Killing in self-defense is approved by God. God blessed Abraham for saving his family from kidnappers. And the selectivist just war theory entails a war in defense of the innocent is a just war. A war fought to execute justice is just. A war must be fought by a government to be a just war. And a war must be fought justly. Then there are questions about nuclear war, etc. The position that I hold is that of the selectivist. The Christians should be peacemakers, not war makers. Christians should resort to war only when all efforts at peace fail. Christians should put God over the government, but encourage obedience to the government, while reserving the right of conscience to dissent from oppressive commands. Thanks for watching. Please see our other videos. Questions and suggestions are welcomed. Please post them in the comments below.